you surprised Troy Weaver was absolutely able to move on from an era so quickly?
I am. I mean, even when the season started and he only had 4 players from last season's roster, it was sort of, well, Blake Griffin is going to have to come at some point, and Derrick Rose was going to be this year. But the transformation and the quick results that we've already seen from these guys, even the rookies, just shows what kind of general manager Troy Weaver is. And I would say he needs to be in the running for executive of the year. They usually give it to a last place team, but to be able to flip this roster and to make some hard decisions, to have that conversation about Blake Griffin is a tough conversation to have, and to find an agreement and a number that worked for both sides was really, really a good development for the Pistons.
It's a lot of money. $13 million is a lot of money for him, for Blake to ultimately give up. But if you look at what he was owed, that's a heck of a chunk of change. How do you believe that they were able to come to an agreement like this?
Well, when you look at the number, it kind of had to fit that way to give them an opportunity to be able to stretch it if they wanted to stretch it over the next 3 years after that. But they just said, no, they're not going to stretch it. They're just going to eat the $30 million lump sum and then just be completely debt free for that in that following season. So 2022, 2023, that season, they'll have all this money off the books. Their rookies will be in their 3rd season. Jeremy Grant's contract will be coming up, and they'll really be able to gauge where they are. So that's the path forward for them, is to try to be off of this money as quickly as they can, and then to really determine what the direction will be with those rookies.
The nature of what we do, I mean, everyone's on their phone all the time, kind of tweeting and making such quick judgments of everything. I had 35 seconds, I think, today slotted for this Blake Griffin news. You cover this team every day, every second. You get to look at it in a much broader picture, in a much more detailed picture. How should people remember the Blake Griffin era in Detroit?
I think it was just, people had expectations of what he would be, that he was this Hollywood guy who was coming in and he wouldn't fit the Detroit culture. And I think he was probably more of the Detroit culture than Andre Drummond or Reggie Jackson or any of those guys were. He was really just a hardworking guy who had high expectations for himself, and he held himself to that every game that he played. He didn't want to mail it in. He didn't want to make anybody feel cheated about it. And you saw that in that playoff game against the Bucks, where he's just playing and he's wearing a humongous knee brace, and he really can't play at the level he wants to play, but he's just gritting it out and gutting it out for the fans. And so many people will point at Andre Drummond as being kind of pouty and maybe taking some games off. Blake Griffin was never that. He wanted to play at times that he couldn't play, and he wanted to give everything. So I think he was closer to the epitome of what a Pistons player is than a lot of people give him credit for.
You brought up what has really been the story for this team this year, Rod. The youth and the development and the pickup of Jeremy Grant and just the absolute flourishing that he's seen on this roster, doing so well. The future looks bright. Dwayne Casey says it. I think anybody that watches this team can agree. What do you believe is the next step that the Pistons should shoot for this season, with the bodies in place and with Killian Hayes hopefully getting healthy sooner than later?
I think that's the next thing to check off, is to see where Killian Hayes is. He's coming off that hip injury, and can he play at a level? And is he the level of talent that we've seen already from Sadiq Bey, from Isaiah Stewart, from Saban Lee, Josh Jackson? Is he on that same level with those guys? And if so, that answers a lot of questions about what this Pistons team is going to be 3, 4, 5 years from now. When you talk about a rebuild, people think it's just a grueling thing where you're going to eat all of these losses year after year after year. We've seen already with Troy Weaver that there are a lot of flashes that can give you optimism. And this is still year one. We're halfway through year one of this rebuild, and we have a clearer sense of what this team can be than you would see in many other rebuilds in year 3 or year 4. So I think that's the optimism that people can take.
You think Weaver will flip any more people at the deadline? I mean, any of these guys that have outperformed maybe expectations, a guy like Josh Jackson?
Not Josh Jackson. I think maybe they'll look at Wayne Ellington if there's an offer for him, maybe even DeLon Wright or Mason Plumlee if the right offer comes along. But I think you've got to maintain some level of veteran leadership with this group. And if you start just giving guys away for whatever you can get, then you've got these rookies who are playing all these minutes and don't really know how to be professionals, don't know how to go into a big game and to prepare and to do things the right way. I think you need to keep some of those guys around for that sort of thing. But they'll listen to whatever offers are there. Jeremy Grant, I think, is just an untouchable. I don't think there's very much that you can offer that the Pistons would even listen seriously to and try to make a move on.
Listen, man, I'm happy the Pistons are doing well. I'm happy for you that the Pistons are actually making things enjoyable this year, because you've come in on this beat. You've done an amazing job, but you've watched some really bad basketball. So I'm happy this year, at least there's some optimism for you and your job and what you get to cover, man.
There's a light at the end of the tunnel, and it's not a train.
It's well put. Rod, thanks, buddy. I appreciate you doing this, man.
Anytime. I appreciate it. Thanks, Brad.